Antarctica seems like a lifeless, icy desert, where apart from ice and penguins, there is almost nothing. But beneath its kilometer-thick ice sheets lies a completely different story. Here they find sunken ships, ancient deoxyribonucleic acid millions of years old, strange blood waterfalls, and even mountain ranges completely hidden under the ice. Scientists continue to discover things that until recently seemed impossible. And today we will embark on a journey through the 15 most mysterious discoveries of Antarctica, each of which reveals a new fragment of the mystery of this icy continent. Today, Antarctica is associated with cold, snow, and endless icy plains. But millions of years ago, this continent looked completely different. Studies conducted on King George Island have shown that about 75 million years ago, dense forests existed here. These ancient ecosystems periodically experienced large-scale fires. Scientists have discovered charred fragments of plants, traces of charcoal, and layers of volcanic ash in ancient rocks. These findings indicate that fires occurred regularly and were associated with volcanic activity. Eruptions threw hot ash and lava into the atmosphere, which set the forests on fire. Thus, cycles of destruction and restoration of ecosystems were formed. These data allow us to imagine Antarctica completely differently, as a warm, humid region with active volcanic activity and dense vegetation. Studying such ancient events helps to understand how ecosystems react to climate change and geological processes. The icy continent stores traces of the distant past in its rocks, when completely different life existed here, and it is precisely these traces that help scientists better understand the future of our planet. Now imagine a place where the existence of life is almost impossible. The soil there is cold, dry, and so poor in nutrients that plants cannot take root. Nevertheless, it is exactly in such conditions that scientists have discovered amazing microorganisms. These microbes are capable of living literally off the air. They get energy from tiny amounts of gases, hydrogen, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide, which are contained in the atmosphere. This discovery was made by research groups from the University of New South Wales and other scientific centers. Scientists studied soil and rock samples collected in the Robinson Ridge and Adams Flat areas in Antarctica. When they analyzed the deoxyribonucleic acid found in these samples, it became clear that whole genomes of unusual groups of microorganisms, known under the names WPS2 and AD3, are present there. These organisms possess unique enzymes that allow them to capture microscopic amounts of gases from the air and use them as an energy source. Moreover, they are capable of fixing carbon, that is, turning carbon dioxide into organic substances, literally creating food from the air. What is amazing is how vanishingly small the amount of energy available to these bacteria is. Hydrogen and carbon monoxide are present in the atmosphere in extremely low concentrations. However, these microorganisms possess enzymes with very high efficiency, allowing them to extract even such microscopic energy resources. Thanks to this, entire microbial communities are able to exist where there is almost no sunlight and organic matter. Scientists believe that such a way of feeding helps microorganisms survive the long Antarctic winters, when the temperature drops to extreme values and the cycles of freezing and thawing become especially severe. This discovery significantly expands our understanding of the boundaries of life. If microorganisms are capable of surviving by feeding on practically nothing but air, then this means that life can exist in much harsher conditions than previously thought. Some researchers even suggest that similar forms of life could exist on other planets, where there are almost no usual sources of energy. Sometimes a single image can cause a storm of discussions all over the world. This is exactly what happened in the year 2009, when satellite images of Antarctica showed an unusual shape resembling a giant pyramid. On the photographs, 4 sides and an almost symmetrical peak were clearly visible. The image quickly spread across the internet, and gave rise to many theories. Some people suggested that this could be a trace of an ancient civilization that existed in Antarctica long before the continent was covered with ice. Others even put forward hypotheses about the extraterrestrial origin of the structure. However, geologists offered a more down-to-earth explanation. Similar shapes can arise naturally. Wind, ice erosion, and the features of the rock structure are capable of creating almost symmetrical peaks. Light and shadows on satellite images can enhance the effect, making the mountain look more like a perfect geometric figure. Later, researchers studied this place in more detail, using new images and radar data. No signs of an artificial structure were discovered. Most likely, it is simply a mountain peak formed by natural processes. Nevertheless, the story itself shows how strong an influence such finds have on people's imagination. Even if this pyramid turned out to be a natural formation, it once again reminded the world of how many mysteries Antarctica hides. When people think of deserts, they usually imagine hot sands and scorching sun. But the largest desert on Earth is actually located in Antarctica. Practically no precipitation falls here, and the air remains extremely dry. Among this icy desert, there is a special place, the McMurdo Dry Valleys. This region looks so unusual that many compare it to the landscapes of another planet. Unlike the greater part of Antarctica, there is almost no ice cover here. Strong winds blow the snow away, leaving open rocky surfaces and dry soil. On these plains, you can see huge sand dunes that rise to a height of up to 70 meters and can stretch for hundreds of meters in width. It looks like a real desert landscape, only in conditions of severe cold. Scientists pay special attention to this place because it largely resembles the conditions on Mars. The soil, climate, and extreme temperatures create an environment similar to that which might exist on the Red Planet. If life can exist here, it means it can potentially exist on other planets too. Another amazing feature is the movement of the sand dunes. They gradually move at about 1.5 meters per year. For such huge structures, this is a fairly high speed. Researchers associate this movement with climate change and temperature fluctuations. When icy areas begin to melt, the wind structure changes and the sand begins to shift. This might seem insignificant, but the movement of the dunes is capable of changing local ecosystems. Under the stones and in the soil, here live rare microorganisms that could disappear if the environment changes too quickly. That is why scientists are trying to study the dry valleys in as much detail as possible. They track the movement of the dunes, study the soil, and observe the weather conditions. This place helps to understand not only the past of Mars, but also the future of Earth. In this quiet and harsh corner of the planet lie hidden the answers to questions about the survival of life in extreme conditions. Deep beneath the seabed of Antarctica, scientists have discovered something similar to a real-time capsule. In layers of silt, at a depth of almost 180 meters below the ocean floor, researchers found fragments of ancient deoxyribonucleic acid. These microscopic remains of genetic material belong to tiny forms of life that once inhabited the ocean. The most amazing thing about this find is its age. Some of the discovered fragments may be older than 1 million years. This makes them the oldest marine deoxyribonucleic acid ever discovered and confirmed by scientists. Interestingly, the discovery happened completely by accident. In the year 2019, a research group was conducting a routine study of the seabed. Scientists were taking sediment samples to understand the soil structure and the history of ocean deposits. But when the samples were later carefully analyzed in the laboratory, broken chains of ancient deoxyribonucleic acid were found in them. Experts carefully studied the degree of destruction of the genetic molecules and compared it with the environmental conditions. It is precisely this that allowed them to determine the approximate age of the find. Some samples turned out to be incredibly ancient. They were formed long before humans began to build ships and explore the oceans. A natural question arises. How could such ancient deoxyribonucleic acid be preserved for so long? The answer lies in the unique conditions of the Antarctic. Cold, darkness, and extremely low oxygen content reign there. Under a thick layer of water and ice, sunlight practically does not penetrate, and the processes of decomposition go incredibly slowly. In such conditions, genetic material can be preserved for much longer than in a normal environment. Scientists call such finds by the term sedimentary ancient deoxyribonucleic acid, or abbreviated as sedimentary ancient deoxyribonucleic acid, ancient deoxyribonucleic acid preserved in sedimentary rocks. These tiny fragments allow us to literally look into the past of the ocean. From them, we can understand which organisms lived in ancient seas, how food chains were structured, and how life in the ocean changed as the climate cooled and ice sheets grew. In fact, it is like a quiet whisper from the distant past, hidden deep beneath the seabed. And perhaps exactly this whisper will help scientists better understand how the oceans of our planet will change in the future. Deep beneath the ice cover of Antarctica hides another amazing phenomenon, a huge subglacial river. Scientists discovered it thanks to airplanes equipped with radars capable of scanning the surface under the thickness of the ice. This river stretches for more than 450 kilometers and passes under several large ice streams before it flows into the Weddell Sea. The movement of water in this system is associated with differences in temperature and salinity. The water flows through subglacial channels and tunnels, connecting huge glacial massifs. The area of the territory it drains is comparable to the area of France and Germany combined. The existence of such a river plays an important role in the dynamics of glaciers. The water under the ice can lubricate the base of the glaciers and accelerate their movement. If the ice begins to melt faster, huge masses can begin to slide towards the ocean. Some estimates show that in the long term, such processes can lead to a significant increase in the level of the world ocean, up to several meters. The discovery of this subglacial river became another reminder of how complex the system of Antarctica is. Beneath the seemingly motionless ice cover hides a whole network of active processes. Antarctica is considered one of the best places on Earth to search for meteorites. Stones from space fall on our planet everywhere, but it is exactly on the white icy expanses of the Antarctic that they are easiest to spot. The contrast between the dark stone and the blindingly white ice makes such finds practically obvious. In addition, the extremely cold and dry climate helps preserve meteorites in an amazingly good condition. In other regions of the Earth, rain, wind, and chemical processes gradually destroy cosmic stones. In Antarctica, the conditions are so severe that many samples can be preserved almost unchanged for thousands of years. But it is not only about good preservation. The movement of glaciers plays a special role. Huge ice sheets move slowly, and the wind and sun gradually clear away the upper layers of ice. As a result, meteorites that once fell on the surface eventually find themselves literally squeezed out. They accumulate on certain areas of the ice field, as if someone had deliberately gathered them in one place. Eastern Antarctica is especially rich in such finds. Since the mid-1970s, research groups have already discovered more than 20,000 meteorites here. One of the most impressive discoveries was an expedition in the year 2013. Over the course of 40 days, a joint team of Japanese and Belgian scientists explored the ice fields and found 425 meteorites with a total weight of about 75 kilograms. Among these samples was a fragment of the asteroid Vesta, as well as a stone that was once part of the surface of Mars. The largest meteorite found on these ice fields over the last 25 years weighed about 18 kilograms. Such finds are of enormous importance for science. Meteorites are real messages from space, They contain information about the early history of the solar system, about the processes of planet formation, and about the composition of ancient celestial bodies. By studying their structure and chemical composition, scientists can learn what materials the planets were formed from and what processes occurred billions of years ago. Therefore, the searches for meteorites in Antarctica continue. The white ice fields remain one of the most valuable natural laboratories for studying space. In the year 2017, an event occurred in Antarctica that puzzled scientists all over the world. A huge hole suddenly appeared in the ice cover, so large that its area was comparable to the territory of Ireland. Scientists call such formations the word polynya. This is an area of open water that appears right in the middle of solid sea ice. Similar phenomena have been observed before, but this polynya turned out to be truly giant. Its area reached approximately 78,000 square kilometers. It was the largest such hole in the ice since the 1970s and the first of such scale in the last 40 years. It appeared in the Weddell Sea, one of the coldest regions of the Southern Ocean. At first, what was happening seemed almost impossible. How can such a huge space of open water form in the middle of a solid ice field, far from land? The answer turned out to be hidden not on the surface, but deep underwater. Warmer and saltier water masses sometimes circulate under the layer of sea ice. Ocean currents are capable of lifting this water upwards. When it reaches the lower part of the ice cover, slow melting begins. The warm water prevents the surface from freezing again, and gradually a window of open water is formed. When this water cools down, coming into contact with the cold surface layers, it becomes denser and sinks down again. Then the current carries it away, and the cycle repeats. The result is a kind of heat circulation loop. However, there is still no complete answer to the question of why such polynyas appear exactly in certain places. Some scientists suggest that their formation is influenced by climate change and the warming of oceanic waters. Others believe that winds and the features of sea currents play their role. There are even hypotheses that marine animals, for example whales or seals, can use such holes for breathing and thereby indirectly help keep them open. Research continues. Such giant polynyas remain one of the mysteries of the Antarctic, and at the same time serve as an alarming signal. They show how complex and dynamic the system of the oceans of our planet is. What happens in the cold waters of the Weddell Sea can ultimately affect the climate, sea ice, and ecosystems far beyond the borders of Antarctica. In one of the valleys of Antarctica, there is a sight that looks almost like a scene from a science fiction movie. A thick, dark red liquid slowly flows out of an ice wall, like from a wound in a huge glacier. This place is known as the Blood Waterfall, and it is located in the Taylor Valley, where the stream flows from the Taylor Glacier directly onto the surface of the frozen Lake Bonny. At first glance, it seems as if the ice is stained with blood, but the explanation is much more scientific. The red color is created by ordinary rust. Deep beneath the glacier is an ancient, salty reservoir of water, locked under a thickness of ice of about 400 meters. This water is extremely salty. Its salinity is even higher than that of seawater. Thanks to this, it does not freeze even at very low temperatures. Inside this subglacial liquid, there is a large amount of dissolved iron. When the iron-rich water comes out through the cracks of the glacier and comes into contact with the oxygen in the air, a chemical reaction begins. The iron oxidizes and turns into rust, coloring the stream in a rich red color. But the most striking thing is hidden inside this subglacial world. Microbes live in the salty water, which are capable of existing without oxygen and sunlight. These organisms receive energy through chemical reactions with iron and sulfur. In fact, it is a small ecosystem, completely independent of solar energy. Studies have shown that this subglacial water could have been isolated from the outside world for thousands and possibly millions of years. The blood waterfall has become a unique laboratory for studying extreme forms of life and ancient chemical processes. That is why scientists show enormous interest in this place. Most people can only see the blood waterfall from the air, from a helicopter, or during rare expeditions in the Ross Sea region. This place looks both frightening and fascinating at the same time, and it reminds us that even in the coldest and driest corners of the Earth, unusual forms of life and complex chemical processes can hide. Among the glaciers of Antarctica, there is one the name of which sounds almost like a warning. We are talking about the Thwaites Glacier, which is often called the Doomsday Glacier. It is located in the western part of Antarctica and represents a huge ice system approximately 75 kilometers wide. This glacier plays the role of a kind of cork, holding back giant masses of ice inside the continent. However, scientists are worried about the speed at which it is moving. The Thwaites Glacier is gradually sliding towards the ocean faster than many other ice massifs. At its edge, there is a huge floating ice platform that comes into contact with seawater. And it is exactly here that the problem begins. Warmer ocean waters gradually penetrate under the ice shelf and begin to undermine it from below. As a result, the ice becomes thinner and loses its stability. Over the past 30 years, the rate of ice loss here has almost doubled. The most important point of this system is the so-called grounding line, where the glacier comes into contact with the solid ground. When this line begins to retreat, the glacier can accelerate its movement. If this process continues, huge masses of ice can begin to flow faster into the ocean. Why is this so important? Because the Thwaites Glacier holds back a whole system of other glaciers behind it. If it weakens or collapses, neighboring ice massifs can also begin to move faster towards the sea. This will lead to a rise in the level of the world ocean. A rise in the sea level can seriously change coastlines all over the world. Cities, agricultural lands, and coastal settlements may be threatened with flooding. Scientists have not yet come to a consensus on how fast these processes can develop. Computer models give different forecasts. Nevertheless, research groups from different countries continue to carefully study the Thwaites Glacier. They send expeditions, drill the ice, install sensors, and study the movement of warm water under the ice shelf. The history of this glacier is simultaneously a scientific mystery and a warning. It shows how sensitive the ice system of Antarctica can be to climate change. The ice of Antarctica can sound like a huge musical instrument. At first glance, this seems like fantasy, but scientists have indeed recorded an unusual phenomenon. The ice sheet emits sounds. We are talking about a giant ice massif called the Ross Ice Shelf. This is the largest ice shelf in Antarctica, hundreds of meters thick and with an area approximately the size of France. This colossal ice massif is so huge that it is capable of influencing the local weather and the movement of air currents. Recently, researchers discovered an amazing feature. The glacier seems to sing. Strong winds that constantly blow over the surface of the icy plains cause the snow dunes and the ice crust to vibrate slightly. These tiny vibrations create a continuous low sound, a kind of hum propagating through the thickness of the ice. The human ear is not capable of hearing this sound because it is below the range of hearing. Therefore, scientists use special seismic sensors installed directly on the surface of the glacier. These instruments catch the vibrations and turn them into recordings that can be analyzed. Interestingly, the discovery was made by accident. Initially, the sensors were placed to observe the movement of ice masses. But instead of the usual signals, researchers began to record a strange, constant rhythm. When scientists began to study the recordings more carefully, they noticed a pattern. The melody of the ice changes along with the state of the glacier itself. When small meltings occur on the surface, or when the wind changes the shape of the snow dunes, the frequency of the sound also changes. In essence, the glacier begins to behave like a giant musical instrument, reacting to the slightest changes in the environment. This discovery turned out to be extremely useful for science. Now researchers can use these sounds as a kind of indicator of the state of the ice shelf. A change in tonality and rhythm can suggest which sections of ice are becoming weaker and where a break-off of huge ice blocks might occur. It turns out that the glacier literally informs scientists about its state. The idea that ice is capable of singing sounds almost like a legend, but it is a completely real physical phenomenon. Deep inside the Antarctic ice world, a quiet, ominous melody constantly sounds. And the more carefully scientists listen to this icy voice, the more they learn about how our planet is changing. Deep beneath the ice sheet of eastern Antarctica hides an entire mountain range, the existence of which people did not even suspect for a long time. It is called the subglacial Gamburtsev Mountains. This is a real ghost mountain massif, completely hidden under the thickness of the ice. These mountains stretch for about 1,200 kilometers and reach a height of about 3,000 meters. However, it is impossible to see them because from above, they are covered by a layer of ice with a thickness of 2 to 4 kilometers. Scientists first suggested the existence of this mountain range back in the middle of the 20th century when they began to analyze data from seismic measurements and gravitational studies. Later, airplanes equipped with radars capable of seeing through the ice allowed for a more accurate mapping of the shape of the hidden mountain peaks. But these mountains surprise not only with their existence. Geologists are amazed by their age. The rocks of which this massif consists can be from hundreds of millions to more than 1 billion years old. With such time frames, mountain systems are usually heavily destroyed by erosion and turn into relatively flat plateaus. However, the Gamburtsev Mountains remain surprisingly sharp and rugged, as if they formed relatively recently. One of the explanations is that the thick Antarctic ice sheet acts as a giant protective blanket. It isolates the mountains from winds, rains, and other processes that usually destroy the relief. Thus, the peaks and valleys could have been preserved in practically their pristine state. There is also another hypothesis. Some researchers believe that under the mountains, there might be a special cold layer of the lithosphere which slows down geological processes and helps to preserve the relief. Modern research continues. Scientists use radars, gravitational measurements, and mineral analysis to better understand the history of the formation of this hidden ridge. The Gamburtsev Mountains remain one of the most mysterious geological objects on Earth, a huge mountain world, forever hidden under kilometers of Antarctic ice. Among the icy expanses of Antarctica, there is a place where the element of fire literally breaks through the kingdom of ice. We are talking about the volcano Erebus. This volcano is located on Ross Island and rises to a height of approximately 3,800 meters. Unlike many other volcanoes on Earth, Erebus has remained active for more than 1 million years. In its crater, there is one of the rarest natural phenomena, a permanent lava lake. Melted magma continuously bubbles and moves, creating an unusual sight against the backdrop of the icy continent. Over the past decades, scientists have noticed that the volcano is showing increasingly active signs of life. Expeditions departing for Erebus face serious difficulties. The path passes through severe weather conditions, strong winds, and complex icy terrain. Only a few research groups are capable of reaching its peak. One of such expeditions took place in the year 2013. Scientists climbed to the crater and discovered something amazing. In the warm areas of the soil and inside the ice caves warmed by volcanic heat, they found microorganisms. These forms of life do not depend on sunlight. They receive energy thanks to chemical processes and minerals coming from the depths of the earth. Such microorganisms are a real treasure for science. They allow us to study how life can exist in extreme conditions. The caves inside the glacier, heated by the warmth of the volcano, create an unusual environment where ice, heat, and chemical energy combine. For researchers, this is a kind of natural laboratory, allowing them to understand how life could have originated on the early Earth and how it can exist on other planets. The volcano Erebus strikes the imagination. This is a place where fire and ice coexist side by side. Standing at its crater, a person feels the power of the geological processes that continue to shape our planet. Antarctica remains one of the most mysterious places on the planet. Under its ice shell hide ancient oceans, secret rivers, traces of vanished forests, and stories that are millions of years old. And the more scientists study this continent, the clearer it becomes. We know only a small part about it. Perhaps the most incredible discoveries are still ahead, and one day, exactly here, the answers to questions about the past of the Earth and the future of our planet will be found.